Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and welcome to the Emergency Home Learning Summit. Our guest is Lisa Nielsen, the Innovative Educator. Welcome, Lisa.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
So, why are you the Innovative Educator?
Um, I have a blog called The Innovative Educator at theinnovativeeducator.com. And the reason I came up with that is that blog was, I believe it's more than 10 years old. And I was doing innovative things in my work, but it wasn't being shared. The innovative work wasn't being shared as widely as I would have liked. So I created the blog to share innovative ideas, not just with this system that I worked in, but with the world. And then that gave me an opportunity in the early days of PLNs, personal learning networks, to develop a personal learning network of other people who were interested in innovation. So that's how that all came about. And my blog and Twitter have really taken me around the world because once people started to read some ideas, and those of us who have innovative ideas in education connected, I got invited to places to speak about innovation in education. So I have been to Israel and Prague and Spain, and it's all just because I wanted to share ideas and connect with other educators who were doing innovative practices with their students. So that's how that started.
You've been writing and speaking about youth and technology for some time. I think you first came to my notice because of cell phones.
Yes.
Can you tell that story?
Yeah, so where I was working, cell phones were banned in school, and they're banned in many schools. But the thing is, I've been to learning conferences where they've asked people, what is your best device for learning? And it's very common for people to pick up their cell phone and say, this is my best device for learning, or what's your best thing for learning? And it's often the cell phone. It's right in your hand, so much power and knowledge, yet our schools were banning it. I really had a problem with that because, people will complain about how kids are inappropriate with technology, yet we're not teaching them to be appropriate with technology. We'll see some teenagers in jobs sometimes who are inappropriate with their phone, but they never spent time in school learning how to use their technology appropriately. So as a result, I wanted people to really understand how to harness the power of cell phones. So I wrote a book called Teaching Generation Text. And that was like at least 10 years ago. And the book just covered all kinds of ways that we could support student learning just with their cell phones. And the reason I focused on cell phones is because it's the most ubiquitous technology for households. When many households might not have a device or the internet, they all have cell phones. And the book also focused a lot on what you could do with just basic texting and all the different resources and services that are available through the use of cell phones. So that's how that came about. And then happily, many schools stopped banning cell phones and realized it was actually a right, a human right, to be able to carry your own technology or device to school. And so I hope in a little way my book helps some districts see the importance of doing that.
I'm pretty confident it did. Did you grow up with a story of education? What was your story growing up?
Um, my story, it's not very uncommon because a lot of innovative educators that I've spoken with have this story, but I was just bored in school. I remember in high school, I wrote a poem just about how boring it was to sit in a classroom. I wrote like, here I am in this boring class. Oh, how slowly the time does pass. A wasted hour every day doing busy work but receiving no pay. And it went on, and I should have practiced it before now. But um, I mean, we were just bored out of our minds, and we would always say, "When are we ever going to need this?" And they'd say, "You'll understand when you got older." And what I understood when I got older was that none of that was true, because the only class that I took in K through 12 that I've used is my 8th grade one semester typing class. That I still use, but anything else I don't really use. And people will push back and say, but you read and you write. And I realized that I didn't learn to read and write in school. And when I wrote in school, it was not for an authentic audience. And for me, what became exciting is writing for an authentic audience, which I first learned about actually through Teachers College Reading and Writing Project. And that didn't even actually have to be with technology, but the whole idea that we were publishing books for people, other people to read, not just for our teachers. So I guess what I'm saying is my story is I was very bored and all the work I did was irrelevant. And I wish that I had spent my school days doing something more meaningful. However, that said, I rushed through school so I could get out and experience the real world. So I didn't suffer for that long because I finished high school at 16 and college at 19. And then I was like, phew, now I could really start to do stuff. So that's my school story.
When did that story change?
What do you mean change? Because yeah.
Okay, so you rushed through, you got done.
Oh,
Yeah,
when did I
what was
realize?
the transformative moment where you felt like you found your voice?
Well, I realized when I had my first job out of college that nothing I learned in school was useful to me. Um, the way I learn, and I know maybe like people who are very good at Jeopardy are good at learning the school way. I am not good at trivia or Jeopardy. The way I learn is experiencing something and doing something. And so I had my first job and I was just very unprepared, but I learned it by doing the work and I had a different field before education. The same thing was true in education. Just taking these classes out of context and without actually being in a classroom was not helpful. I had to experience it. And then, as far as finding and sharing my voice, I realized that if I wrote about what I was thinking, it's interesting because that suddenly sort of makes you an expert on a topic. But it's really, for me, I'm just trying to learn about the topic. So, for example, we're in an election time right now. And 4 years ago, when Trump won the election, I really wasn't expecting him to win. And so I hadn't done much research into what a Trump presidency would mean for education. So I spent like locked up about 3 days studying it and writing about it. And I knew nothing about it really 3 days prior. But because I wrote that series, I was invited to Washington, D.C. to do a press briefing. So it's that sort of thing that if you find your voice and share your voice, then you can connect with others and help other people learn more about whatever it is that they're interested in.
Did your parents have a different story about education?
Yes. Um, my parents, well, it's interesting. My father was able to go to trade school, and that's something, as you may know, is not very prevalent any longer. So he really liked trade school. That really worked well for him, and he became a sound engineer. Um, and they both liked school actually. Um, so, and I think it might have been a little different school for them. It wasn't, there wasn't the standards and the testing. There were more electives. The trade school is like the best elective you could have. You get to go deeply into something. So I think that they had a different story because they had a different experience.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the things that you're currently thinking about. We're in this very interesting moment, right? For a lot of people, they're floundering. They're not quite sure what they're doing. Uh, for many, it feels like a very negative turn. Are there bright sides to this significant shift right now?
Yeah, I mean, and I know a lot of people who are interested in innovation and education or any field have said this, but the pandemic has projected us very far into the future. So, um, aside from the obviously awful parts of the pandemic, there's so many exciting things. Education, I mean, many fields, but education will be forever changed. We're finally addressing the digital divide. and we are getting devices in the hands of all children. We are getting internet into the homes of everybody. And in places where that's not happening, people are realizing that this is a right, not just a nice to have, but you must have this to succeed today. And we're realizing this late, but so quickly, so many school systems have gotten up to speed. So that's great. And we're realizing that educators cannot stay stuck in the past. They must learn how to integrate technology into teaching and learning. And when we, there's the SAMR model of substitution, and that's where many people are right now. But when we really redefine what teaching and learning is by truly and meaningfully integrate technology, which we're starting to do because we got everyone at least at that substitution level, and for the most part, or many people. So I'm pretty excited about it because things like, for example, assessment, and I should tell a little background. My background, I was a librarian, I was a literacy coach, so I could talk well to that topic area. But we used to have to determine students' reading levels, and that could take hours and hours and days and weeks. And instead of helping children learn, we were assessing children. Now you can automatically determine a child's reading level where they speak to the computer. The computer does a whole analysis, it analyzes data in amazing ways. That's the sort of authentic assessment that I like because it's meaningful for the teacher, for the student. It doesn't take time away from the teacher. The student can see their growth. And so things like that, that we could take assessment in many cases out of the hands of teachers so that teachers can rethink what their role is. And this gives teachers so much more time to be by the side of the student, serving as a coach, as a cheerleader, as a facilitator that helps them learn. And even, as far as teaching, a lot more teachers are learning about the flipped classroom model. So they don't have to spend their time teaching in front of their students. The students can watch a video and then they can spend their time supporting students and learning. So these are all things that are going to be so much, much better for students after we figure, after the teachers learn how to do this. And of course, some teachers were already there and they love this teaching with technology. It's even better for them. But for some teachers, it's brand new and they will learn because teachers are a passionate bunch and they really want to support their children. So, or their students. So I think that's really great. And then the other areas, like we have something called related services, and it's been really cool to be able to do related services, which is like supporting students with disabilities, but really harnessing technology. And we I connect often with students with disabilities as part of my work. And for them, it's been really great because the technology that they've used doesn't seem like this weird or special thing because now all students are using it. And I'm just going to keep going on and on here because there's so much exciting about this. The other thing is that when we have content that's digital, we have content that's accessible. If we were stuck in our paper world, which we were before the pandemic, then content is not accessible for people with disabilities. And part of what I do is I explain to people how to create content that is digitally accessible. And that means it could be easily read by a screen reader for people who have visual problems. You can have content that that you have audio for if there are people who have vision issues. The fact that you can expand text, all of these things become available with technology that were not available with paper. The other thing, where I teach, we have many students who speak languages other than English, and we teach people how to write content that is most easily translatable. So if you're providing digital content and you have students who speak other languages and you write and use content in a way that's easily translatable and it's not difficult to learn, we have a 1 hour class on it, then students who have a different language than English or wherever your country is, they can get that content instantly given to them. And there's even voice content where if an instructor is speaking in English, the student can have it come to them in whatever language they speak. So there's just all these ways that technology makes what you're learning and content accessible to all sorts of people. All of these things are finally coming to light. We're also really pushing companies like Google, like Zoom, um, Microsoft Teams, they all are now Zoom is behind, but they're coming up there, putting captioning. You could do captioning with Zoom, but it takes a lot of work. But Google Meet, Teams, they all have live captioning. Um, with Microsoft Live, you can get the live captioning in your own language. It's so cool. So these are just some of the great things that are coming out. The tech companies really had to step up and make their platforms a lot safer than they had before. And everyone is learning very quickly how to use this technology in really important ways. So those are some of the things, but I'll let you ask me another question to get excited about.
So if there's in a large bureaucratic system, if there's always been a difference between genuinely being interested in something and looking like you're interested in it, right? Maybe the college admissions is a good model, right? So there's the evidence of being purpose driven, and then there's the look recreating that kind of thing to look good on your college application. Is this a moment for parents and students to figure out what their kids really want to do and are interested in rather than looking like they're getting ready for the next step?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can do both at this time. And if played right, if students are spending more time at home, if they're doing that because they're on a hybrid model where they're in school someday or they're just in a remote model, there are, well, I guess I'll say if it's played right, it could be both. They could look like they're doing something to get accepted and actually be doing something that they're interested that will get them accepted. So there's a couple platforms I really love. There's Thrively, and Renzulli is a paid for version of Thrively. So if I don't know if a school system has it or if the parents want to purchase it, there's Renzulli Learning and Thrively. But I would start with Thrively since you can access a lot of it for free. And what it does is it does a talent profile on your child. And it's so cool because it shows all the different things that your child is good at, and then possible careers, and then all these extracurricular activities that are aligned to what that student loves. So even if the student isn't traditionally in a school with extracurriculars, with a tool like Thrively, they can not only discover their passions, talents, interests, and abilities, but then it gives you a ton of resources to go more deeply into those passions, talents, interests, and abilities. And what's really also cool about it, if a parent spends some time with their child, they can teach their own child how to be a self-driven, independent learner and navigate through that tool without too much support from the families. Of course, this changes, if we're talking about below fourth grade, the kids will need more support. But once you're in fourth grade and up and you know how to read, the kids can really navigate through that well. What I would suggest for parents if their children are working remotely is to come up with a plan for the week and have a calendar. You know, thank goodness in homes the kids don't have to move by bells, and it always was problematic for me that we were moving kids by bells rather than showing them in very early grades how to use a calendar and move by a calendar. The parents can start to show their children how to make a plan for the week. They can plan out the hours. This might take some time on a Sunday night. It could include school activities and non-school activities. And then the parents can show their child how to navigate between each activity that they have. And a tool like Thrively is a great tool that if you have gaps that your child needs help, um, you know, doing things, Thrively will give them those activities. I also would remind parents that, have childcare issues because their child might be home more. There's some really interesting things that people are doing with video babysitting, and that there's really paid for services now with that. But you can maybe have your grandparents help your child using video, and a lot of people are like, but my grandparents or the grandparents don't know how to use it. Well, spend some time, try to teach them, get them a basic device, and they can sit there with your child and help them. And if you have some network like that, there are a lot of other people we can think of to call on. And if you have teens, and this example is not just, I know some families who are doing this. They have teens in their neighborhood that can either support the children via video or face to face, and those teens can put this on like their resume or application that they did tutoring. And it doesn't take a big knowledge in in whatever the child is learning, because there are these platforms. I mentioned Thrively, which has a large free component, but there's also something called Wide Open School from Common Sense Education. It's 100% free. You couldn't get through those resources in a lifetime. So you come up with the plan with your child. If the child is old enough, they can do a lot of that on their own, but there are also people that you can bring in to help support your child as well. And this is going to give the kids such a rich way to learn in a deeper, more interactive way than they might typically even get in school.
So what advice would you give a parent who's got a child who's having a hard time engaging that proactively?
Engaging with the learning tools?
And just engaging with anything proactively, right?
Yeah, so I mean, it's different depending on the age of the child. And as you know, I wrote a book called The Working Home Educator's Guide to Success. So if you have a teenager, it, it's usually a lot easier. You know, you don't have to often worry about the childcare needs with the teenager. So with the teenage, people say, if my child had it his or her way, they'd sit around watching TV or playing video games all day. But the reality is, if you show them how to explore things that they're interested in, they're going to get excited. And really, our current economy has moved toward a gig economy. I know people who have young children. The one I'm thinking of right now, an 8-year-old child who started a business using technology, but he was making these kind of dolls. I forgot what they were called, but they represented things in the community, and he was selling them not only online, but he'd also have them in stores for people to buy. And there was a cute card that said who this was made by. But like, this is an opportunity for kids to make money too, and in the gig economy sort of way. And kids don't generally get bored when they have an opportunity to make money doing something they love. Schools currently do not really prepare students for a gig economy. This is a really fun sort of thing that our kids can be doing right now, whether it's a physical thing that they're making, whether now I'm thinking of another friend of mine who has a 5-year-old who started making exercise videos. And he could share that not only with family and friends, but like other young kids can watch him doing the exercise videos. So I think when you have interest and passions, it's hard to not have engagement. And that's what a lot of schools, like free schools or agile learning centers, they really focus on helping your children find their passions, talents, interests, and abilities. And there's also something called the school-wide enrichment model. That used to be very popular, and that model helps kids of all ages find what they are excited about. And also remember, you can organize having kids talk to each other who might be interested in something, whether it's face to face or using technology. So you can gather those kids up, and kids in general really have a fun time talking and connecting with each other. So those are just a few ideas I have for that.
You've got a lot of energy and a lot of ideas. Was there an adult who played outside of your parents who played a significant role in your learning development?
Yes, me, but that wasn't an adult, was it? Um, no, I mean, I I can't really call to anyone because most of what I did was just not like my what was being thrust upon me as a kid. So what I learned, as I said before, I learned by doing things, but I also learn by talking to people about whatever it is I'm trying to learn. And there wasn't a lot of that in school because that was called cheating, basically. Going out, trying to talk to people to figure things out and play with ideas, and I always got this in school that I talked too much during class, and I'm a social learner. So there was no one who was like, the way you're learning is fine. And I got very good grades. I always graduated honors, top 10%, because I just tried to get through things quickly so I could do things. But I can't really think of any adult. No, it was just more like when I became an adult and finished school, I finally got to learn in the way I learned best.
I think you're an advocate for independent decision making. You're One of the difficulties of the parent-child relationship is there's so much emotion and kind of history.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if you can think of any practices that would help parents and children together kind of create a structure for exploring different learning opportunities, almost like a map, a learning map, or an education map.
Yeah, in in my, I believe it's the Working Home Educator's Guide to Success. I talk about a young person named Leah, and you know, what they did, what actually she was a teenager, I think about 14, and she wanted her parents to allow her to learn without school. So she created a PowerPoint presentation to share with her parents about what her own learning plan was, which is easier when you're a little older. But I think that a parent can work with their child of any age to think about what their learning plan might be and really think deeply about where is it. When I was in school, when I was in high school, the goal was to look good to get into college, but there was never anything about where did I actually want to go. And I think if we start to have these conversations with kids now, they can start to think about and map out a plan. And that tool I mentioned, Thrively, actually really helps you map out your own plan for where you want to go. And when I share this advice, some people say, but what if the child changes their mind? And I say, well, we change our minds all the time. So now they have a plan to go one place. The more important thing is that they know how to make a plan to go to the next place. I myself have been in 3 different careers, which is not even considered that much compared to what today's people entering the workforce might be in. So it's just about helping those children learn and plan. And as I'm saying this, I realize that Thrively does help you go through those actual steps to create a plan, no matter what it is that your goals are. And what's cool with Thrively is it does show you, like, you like to do this. These are people who have those careers. It has videos of those people telling you how they pursued their career. So it gives kids a real path to learning. And the other cool thing with technology that's happening more and more is people used to think if you were inviting guest speakers, they'd have to physically come to the class. But they're now realizing more and more that you can invite anyone from around the world into your class, whether you're physically in your class and they're coming into your classroom through a laptop and projector, or whether your students are remote. Like, we can really connect kids to whatever it is that they're interested in, and that will really support them in learning. Even mentoring is so much easier if we think about mentoring remotely.
Is there anything else that you feel like you've learned about learning that would make a real difference to parents and students at this time?
I mean, I think just the idea for me, I believe I really started to be able to learn well, write well, etc. once I actually had something that let me connect with an authentic audience, and that something was technology. So my advice is, let your kids use those screens. Um, the the real enemy we've heard about, oh my God, there's too much screen time for kids. There's not too much screen time, there's too much seat time. So my advice for parents is, yes, let your kids use those screens. Make sure that they are not sitting and being sedentary. They might be using those screens to use something like Go Noodle to do exercise videos. They might be using those screens to write something to a real and authentic audience. They might be using them to make exercise videos. And I'm speaking a lot about exercise because I think that is something that, number one, um, we have a fear of with screen time. But the other thing is, in regular school, the amount of time that students sit in a seat is very problematic. With the pandemic, we have really focused on getting kids outdoors more. And that's very healthy for parents to think about as well. But that also might not mean not having a screen, because you might be using, a smartwatch to track your calories and heart rate or whatever it is. But the advice to parents is make sure that you and your children are really cognizant of how much time you're sitting and moving, because we want to make sure uh, that there's at least 1 to 2 hours or more a day of that for your children. But then remember, those screens can be used for so many great things that can even change the world by what you are creating and producing. You can also collaborate so much better and more effectively now that we have technology and the internet. And I would also say, if you don't have technology and the internet, you need to fight for this, because it is a right. And any other family that you know who doesn't have it, maybe you get together, you call the press, you make a stink about it, because our child, all of our children will succeed when they have the access to the tools that they need to learn, to work, to produce, to create, to collaborate. And that involves internet and a device. So I guess that's my advice for families.
Thank you, Lisa.